So good to see everybody. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Big Tent USA and our tent talk with the incredible group Mi Vecino. Big Tent USA is a national women-led pro-democracy organization promoting civic engagement through education and activism. So please check out our website at bigtentusa.org. Follow us on social media, Big Tent USA, and please sign up for our newsletters where we have a lot of great information. We're going to be getting into our activism for the midterms. When we have events coming up, they'll be in those newsletters. So please sign up on our website. I am so pleased to introduce the fabulous co-founders of Mi Vecino, Devon Murphy Anderson and Alex Berrios. Last fall, during the dark days of the controversy surrounding SB1, the anti-voting bill in Texas, I first heard Alex and Devon talk about Mi Vecino. So I want to thank them personally for pulling me out of a very dark place. Devon is the CEO of Mi Vecino. Previously, she was an indomitable fundraiser for the Florida Democratic Party, raising over $20 million for the party in the last election as the finance director. Now at Mi Vecino, she's met more record-breaking fundraising goals. In only 9 months, her donor programs have driven over $1.2 million in donations. Alex developed field programs in partnership with organizations such as the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, Florida for All, and the New Georgia Project. In 2021, Alex returned to the Florida Democratic Party as a senior advisor and then served as campaign director, managing the field data, voter protection, municipal victory, and training departments. Please put your questions in the chat for Alex and Devon. And with that, I will turn the call over to them.
Thank you so much, Kitty. We'll have a deck that we'll go through for everybody. Let's do, let me just present and then we'll jump right into it. Just a second. Fantastic. Can everybody see my screen?
Perfect.
All right, great. Thank you so much for having us today. My name is Alex Berrios. I'm one of the co-founders of Mi Vecino. I'm a Florida native. Just a little bit about me. I'm of Puerto Rican and Cuban descent. My mother was born in Marianao, Cuba, and I grew up hearing the stories of the Castro regime, stories of soldiers coming into their home, pointing guns at my mother and my uncles as they hid behind my grandmother. These stories had an impact on me growing up. I can only imagine what it was like for her and others growing up in these times. It really informs the work that we do here, and these stories have stayed with me to this day. My father was born on the island of Puerto Rico in a labor camp. My father grew up picking tomatoes. He worked on a farm, and then he worked as a mechanic here in Florida at a gas station. And my father took a lot of pride in the work that he did. And I remember growing up, all he ever really wanted was an opportunity to provide for his family. And I know how he feels today. I want the same opportunity for my son, who's my reason for doing everything. And I would love the opportunity to provide him with a good education, a safe environment, the opportunity to grow and be whoever he would like to be and to follow his dreams. I want to provide my son with opportunities that I never had. I was born and raised in Broward County in a very low-income community, moved to Palm Beach County, and have lived here ever since. Kitty spoke a bit about my professional work before coming into politics. I worked in boxing for about 20 years or so, a product of the environment that I grew up in. Again, my son, a big motivator for why I got into politics. It's what transitioned me away from that career and into this one. His specific concerns were around gun violence in schools. And unfortunately, we haven't moved the needle a whole lot, since then, but we're hopeful and encouraged that we're going to make a difference here at Mi Vecino. Devon, you want to tell the team a bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Alex. And thank you all so much for having us and for taking time out in the middle of your day to hear about our work. My name's Devon. I'm the other co-founder of Mi Vecino. I am originally from Maine. My mom is a first-generation American. Her family fled Northern Ireland as Irish Catholics because of a lot of the violence there. And so she was born in the Bronx to a very traditional Irish Catholic, very large family. I have 9 aunts and uncles on that side. My dad is a second generation American. He is Greek and Swedish. And so what that meant for me growing up is we really had this immigrant mentality of keeping your head down and working hard, which has really stayed with me my entire life. When I was in 8th grade, I bought my first lobster skiff. My dad's family lobsters, that's what they do for work. I painted that skiff pink, which as you can see is still my favorite color today. And I started working to save up for college. College is not something that was expected or something that people do on either side of my family, but it was really, really important to me. I loved school. And I loved the feeling of working hard and learning. That was kind of my way out. So I waitressed and lobstered to put myself through school. I went to school in North Carolina. And I became involved in politics at a pretty young age in high school when I was looking around and I saw so many people from my community falling through the cracks because they didn't have opportunities, just like Alex mentioned. There's not safety nets in place for folks. And so I really started to learn more about policy and elected officials and how they impact our lives. Alex, if you want to go to the next slide, I think we can talk a little bit about why we founded Mi Vecino, and we can just go from there.
Sure. Thank you, Devon. So Mi Vecino is a data-driven grassroots organization. We're structured as a 501c4 dedicated to building political power within the Hispanic community. We don't do voter registration in a very traditional sense. We think that we need to examine some of the whys behind the way we approach politics and organizing, and whether we think it's effective. If those of you who follow Florida politics, you've seen that it's been pretty one-sided for the past couple decades. In this, I would normally ask folks to raise their hand, but I can't really see people. So if you think that things should be done differently in Florida, maybe put a 1 in the chat. I'd love to take the temperature of the room, because we definitely think things need to be done differently. Data is really important. The data has gotten a bad rap from some of the previous cycles. A lot of it isn't so much about the problem, isn't a problem about the data itself, so much is about what we're collecting, what we're asking, and how we're approaching this work. As an example, traditionally, organizations will register voters, and the outcome they're looking for is just to register voters. So if a generic organization went out and registered 100 voters, at this time, the split would be roughly 25 Democrats, 25 Republicans, and about 50 NPAs. But those groups have different subsections, different turnout in the subsections, and so you would end up with a far different picture when election day came, because not everybody's going to vote. Out of that 100, you're going to get about 52 votes cast. Of the 52, about 14 would be Democrats, about 16 would be Republicans, and 22 would be NPAs. Then the NPAs are going to break up and split, and you end up coming out with the Republican Party 2 votes ahead. That's based on the voter behaviors. When you're close to the situation, you're in the community the way that we are, you're talking to people, you start to understand that there needs to be more consideration in the approach that you take to this work. You can't just register people to vote and then send them on their way. I'll see you in 18 months, because a lot happens between registration and a vote being cast. The work that we do at Mi Vecino is to fill that gap and build a bridge between those 2 points. Because we're not just registering voters, we're building community. We're connecting with people. We continue to survey them for issues, find out what's driving the narrative in their communities, what's concerning them. And then we're also able to keep track of a lot of the misinformation and disinformation that's popping up in our communities. Devon, you want to tell everybody a bit about our program?
Yeah, sure. So Alex and I met at the Florida Democratic Party. I was the finance director, Alex was working in field. And both of us, as you can probably hear from our stories and make a few assumptions, we are both very driven people. We are both very outspoken and opinionated people. And we're both political outsiders. We didn't grow up in families that were involved in politics. We didn't really have anything handed to us. And so when we got to these institutions, we had this mentality of like, okay, we're here to make change, right? I don't know what you all are doing, but that's why we're here, right? And that wasn't exactly, we weren't exactly welcomed in a lot of our institutions. And so when we founded Mi Vecino, it was election night. Alex and I were on the phone and we were like, what we have done has not worked. We've been saying it's not going to work for months. We've been ringing the alarm. We've been, saying that what we're doing, particularly in communities of color, multicultural communities, is not resonating. We have to do something better. And so that night, we're both on Google. We're looking at organizations. We're going through our Rolodexes. We're trying to figure out who's doing it right. Who is on the ground doing what we think needs to be done in order to win moving forward? And y'all, there was no one. There was nothing. And so we said, kind of put our hands up and said, okay, we're going to do it ourselves. And so there are three things prominently that we do very differently that's groundbreaking here in Florida. So number one is usually how voter programs work in Florida is we register voters to vote, and then we follow up with them to ask them to enroll and vote by mail. Now, the reason that has not worked traditionally very well for us is that it's a huge waste of resources. You're paying the same staffers to contact the same voters multiple times in a way that is an ask. It's a handout. It's we need something from you. And so that increases and magnifies a transactional understanding of what politicians, what political parties, et cetera, want from our communities. So we do simultaneous vote by mail enrollment. So when we ask a voter to register to vote, we also ask them to enroll and vote by mail on the spot. We have an 84% conversion rate. What we know in Florida is that voters who are enrolled in vote by mail in this upcoming election are 90% likely to vote. Okay, now that is compared to around a 55% turnout rate for voters who are not enrolled in vote by mail. That's based on 2018 and 2020 data. That's number one. Number two is we have a full-time engagement program. So once we register a voter and we ask them what matters to them, we record that answer. We record when a voter's top concern is healthcare. We record that it's education because they have a child who wants to go to college and they don't know how they're going to make that work financially. All of that is qualitative and quantitative data we collect and enter into our database that is assigned to that voter. So when we follow up with that voter next, it's not a political ask. We're not asking anything of them. We're saying, thank you so much for registering to vote. Thank you for participating in our democracy. We know that the biggest barrier for you and your family to achieving the American dream right now is access to affordable healthcare. And here are some ways here are some resources to help your family with that. And then the last thing that we do differently is that we only hire from within the communities we work. We have 25 full-time staffers. The senior staff of our organization is Alex and myself and Ann Wedner, who's also on this call, and that is it. We have 22 folks who 100% of whom speak Spanish and are Hispanic on the ground every single day. So if you want to go to the next slide, Alex. You want to talk about why Florida is still in play and kind of the cumulative vote difference between Democratic votes cast and Republican votes cast?
Yeah, I think it might be important to highlight from one of the significant differences in what we do is that we create access to our politics for everyday people, especially the people that are immigrating to Florida and they're becoming citizens in Florida. Our first regional hire was a young woman named Veronica. And she had worked for every organization in Central Florida over 10 years. Always as a canvasser, always as a field organizer, but never hire. And we survey our own staff as well, because if we don't have a positive sentiment among our own staff, what chance do we have of winning over a community, constituency? And what we learned is that a lot of our staff has done the same job over and over again for different organizations for years, and they feel exploited. They feel taken advantage of. They're hired, they're fired. They have an instability in their lives that's hard to deal with, and they're never given an opportunity for upward mobility. Veronica doesn't speak a lot of English, and so she was always a name on the list that's always there to be hired when an organization or a campaign wants to put some boots on the ground. And so our community feels used for its labor, for its vote, but not valued as people. And so this has been something that we've looked to change and just be on the forefront of developing a new narrative, a new sense of community, and just reinventing what relational organizing looks like in Florida. This is incredibly important, especially when talking about what Florida looks like electorally. The last cycle was just a single cycle. It was, I believe it was an outlier, but it's an outlier that should be paid attention to for the direction that things are going if we don't pay attention to those things. Over the last 10, 20 years or so, I believe over 20 years, we've had roughly 50 million votes cast total across statewide elections. And the difference separating Democrat and Republican votes is somewhere around 100, 200,000 votes. Over 50 million, that's a minuscule amount of votes cast. And even when we talk about our program and the success of our program, which we're very proud of, 14% of our registrants are Republicans, with the bulk of them being Democrats and then a significant number being NPAs. No matter how they register, all of those voters are up for grabs. If you reach out and you grab them, if you build relationships with them, if you're present in the community, they're there. They want to be valued, and they know when they're being persuaded, they know when they're being pandered to. So, we estimate in Florida, there are about 700,000 potential new Hispanic voters that we can register, engage, and educate. That's an incredibly important part. Education, voter suppression, and the laws that come out of our Republican-controlled legislature are constantly complicating the process. They send a chill across the community with veiled threats of oversight and police task forces, and creating hurdles and fines for people to make this as difficult as possible. At Mi Vecino, we work very hard to stay in contact with people, to educate people, and to make sure that they're mobilized and they understand their rights. This is incredibly impactful because the person that they meet on the ground that registers them, they're also going to see, a week later, 2 weeks later, they hear from them 30 days later in our engagement program. We're putting faces to the process. And for people, that's important. They want somebody that they can talk to, somebody that they can learn from. If you're like me and if you call, even just say AT&T, so, Comcast, if God forbid you use Comcast and you have to talk to their customer support, I hit zero over and over again until I get to a person, because that's what people want. They want human interaction. And because we're year-round boots on the ground in Florida, our staff is always present. Their jobs are stable. They know they can count on us, and the community knows they can count on us too. So we're always present, we're always there, and we build trust.
So something that I think we've all read a lot in the headlines has been this focus on Hispanic voters and the slight shift right that we saw, particularly in 2020 in South Texas and South Florida. And I think something that frustrates Alex and I a lot about this narrative that is being pushed, and that the GOP has an invested interest in making sure is pushed, is that Hispanic and communities of color have typically been considered Democratic-based voters. And there was a slight move to the right in certain areas, in certain Hispanic populations in 2020. One cycle, that was a trend. And all of a sudden, Democrats are throwing their hands up saying, we've lost, Florida's a lost cause, we don't know what to do, we're writing this state off. What Republicans did after Obama won in Florida in 2008 and 2012 is they looked at what we did and they said, we have to do that. And they invested, they had a huge press release, a huge press conference. They said, we're going to do exactly this. We're going to invest in community centers. We're going to invest in building community relationships that are not based on a political issue or any sort of political action. And they invested in, they saw a window of opportunity in Democratic-based voters, and they invested over a period of a full decade in order to get that slight right shift. So what we should be doing is not looking at Florida and saying, oh, there was a slight shift right in certain demographic breakdowns. That's it, hands up, we're done. We should be doing exactly the opposite. We should be doing exactly what the Republicans did, which is investing more, investing in the community, and providing stable and permanent jobs to community members to prove we're not just out here messaging about the economy. We care about your economy, and we're employing you and directly investing in making sure that you and your family have the opportunities that you came to this country for. Alex, I don't know if you want to say anything else about this slide. I think the only thing to really highlight here is the demographics of Florida is changing rapidly, and it is estimated that we're going to be the 6th white minority state in the country in the next 10 years. And if we don't figure out how to message and turn out our base voters, right, then the state will be lost. But there is still an opportunity.
Yeah, I would only, that pretty much covered it, Devin. I would only add that, having proximity to people is incredibly important. When we come and go from the community around the election cycle, we lose touch with people, we lose faith with people, and we're not in sync with the communities that we're looking to serve. And so we're not aware when the results and outcomes of our tactics and our approaches change. We don't know that. And as a collective, when you're in the strategic conversation for what your campaign is going to look like, what voters you want to talk to, you don't realize that the issues of those voters have changed. And so many of the people that are making those decisions have not been on the ground in a decade. The last time they talked to a voter was when, Obama was elected in Florida. And at this point, you're talking to that voter's kids. Things are different. Everything is different. And you need to have the most current and up-to-date information, which is why, our organization is data-driven, and we believe in constantly staying in communication with people. So I just outlined a couple of the challenges that are faced by Democrats. It's honestly faced by both parties, significantly within the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is, we struggle. The Democratic Party struggles as a Big Tent. I say we because I am a registered Democrat. It's just habit. As a Big Tent, you have to deliver a message that is culturally competent and it's diverse. But then, as I said, when you're coming and going from the community, when you have leadership changes, these things make it difficult to maintain that contact, to build infrastructure. And so what Florida really lacks is the continuous infrastructure that's consistent, that's competent, and that's always there. And so our goal at Mi Vecino was to build that bridge to that community. Now we've seen over the last decade how the party, the vote share among the Democratic Party and the Republican Party has changed. Back in 2012, when Obama last won, there were over 500,000 more registered Democrats at that time. When we started Mi Vecino in the beginning of 2021, we projected that the Democratic Party would lose its registration edge for the first time, and it did at the end of 2021. If our program, the Mi Vecino program, was fully operational and scaled up at the beginning of 21, leading into 22, we would not be at the Democratic Party would not be at the disadvantage that it is today. The Mi Vecino program scaled produces about 140,000 votes per cycle. We'll get into some of those numbers a little bit later, but that type of consistent work to stop the hemorrhage, to connect with people, so that way they understand the common ground that we share, to help shape point of view and be able to influence people and build trust, is critical to winning their votes. Because when you only come 60 days before an election, people know you haven't been there all this time. They know you, they haven't seen you in a year. They haven't seen your organization. They haven't seen this candidate. They haven't seen your employees. They know you're only there for their vote, and they know, again, when they're being marketed to. So some of the solutions that we're deploying, the first one is a very simple one, as Devin outlined with some of the vote by mail engagement. People are very, very highly likely to vote if enrolled in vote by mail. They don't always mail it in. They'll vote early, they'll vote in person. But when we take a look at voter behavior in 2018, in 2020, we are seeing a trend in Florida emerge. It's a lot stronger in the Democratic Party, and it has different outcomes with different segments among the electorate. It's a very powerful tool in some of the infrequent voters, which the Hispanic community is unfortunately part of. There's not a lot of engagement because of the difficulty. We're very transient. Unfortunately, it's part of the nature of the community. People move to the community, they immigrate to Florida. Unfortunately, many of us are in low-income communities like the one that I grew up in, and growing up, I moved a lot. And it's hard to find voters when they're renters and they're moving and their address changes, and voters just aren't well educated on the process. That's constantly changing. So education is the second piece. We combine with the vote by mail. We make sure that we stay in contact with people. We educate them on the process. We're listening to their concerns, and they have the ability to reach us as well. So we can mobilize them later in the year if we choose to get into that line of work, which is something that we're considering. So that way we can just, we do more than just connect with the community. We build true political power, and we deliver votes cast. from our friends, our neighbors, and our families, so they understand that in order for us to affect the issues that drive us, we need to be part of the process to select the representation that we want to see. We don't talk to people, we don't talk about people, we talk with people. And a lot of that time is spent listening.
So here's a few numbers that just show our results so far. So we put together this slide deck probably a month ago, and that some of these numbers have changed even since then. So we're actually up to 97% of the voters that we've registered are people of color. About 85% of those have self-identified as Hispanic voters. Again, we talked about the 84% conversion rate into vote by mail. And here's our breakdown in terms of the voters that we're registering on the ground. I think something that's super interesting and that we can talk about more in the question section, if you all are interested in hearing more about it, is that we are seeing a huge increase on the ground in the last 2 to 3 months of voters registering as no party affiliate voters, as independent voters. Now, there's 2 types of voters that are doing this. Number one is voters, when we're updating their voter registration, they are changing their party affiliation from either Democrat or Republican to NPA. The reason that they are doing that is a long list of reasons that they have had years to put together and form. So pushing back on that in one interaction is a really hard thing to do successfully. Number 2 are voters who are registering for the first time, and they're choosing to register as not affiliated with either party. And the number one reason that people are citing is because they see both parties as the same. Now, here's the glimmer of hope, because that's a really bad thing, y'all. When we have one party that is A, completely anti-democracy, and B, completely focused on culture wars and not solving any of the issues that everyday Americans face, and we have one party that is not exactly the best, that's why Alex and I left, but that at least isn't trying to destroy the basis and the foundation of our democracy, right? The fact that voters see those two as the same is, I cannot stress enough how dangerous that is, how worrisome that is, but there is a glimmer of hope. The glimmer of hope is that when we ask voters what matter to them, they are 100% united in the issues that they think about every single day. It is gas prices, it is affordable housing, and it is changing our system so that our wages are enough to be able to pay our bills. That's how people frame it. They don't frame it as they want, how do I say this? They want handouts is how they say it. They frame it as in they want to be able to make enough to support their family. They want those 2 things to match, okay? And then the follow-up question when we ask them, which party do you think is the best party to deliver that change in a policy form? Voters don't see a difference. It's 50-50 split. And that is not just from our qualitative experience. There have been other studies that have run, particularly with young voters here in Florida, and that's the result from their polling as well. Alex, if you want to go to the next slide, unless you have anything else to add here.
No, I would just add that it's, again, when you don't stay in the community, it's hard to stay in touch with the community. And this is why, I think what we do is incredibly important. When you talk about our growth here, do you want to tell them about, I think that they would really love to hear about Richard. It's a really good story for the type of organization that we want to be and create in Florida.
Yeah, sure. We had a canvasser probably 2 weeks ago who essentially suffered a heart attack when he was in the field and was taken to the hospital. And the way that our team rallied was something that Alex and I could have never expected. Our canvassers are paid by the hour. And so what this meant for Richard was that he was a few days out of work, not being paid. And so every single one of our team members, I just want you to understand, y'all, when we're talking, we have 5 teams in 5 counties across all of Florida. They rallied and they all got together and wrote this email to us saying, we would like to work for free for Mi Vecino, every single one of us, an extra hour a day for as many days as Richard is out. And we want you to take that money and we want you to pay Richard so that he has what he needs during this difficult time. That's one thing that he doesn't have to worry about, is his paycheck being impacted at all. And so our team in Miami, our 3 teams across the I-4 corridor, all came together. And I mean, Alex and I, of course, were going to pay Richard anyway, but the fact that they came together on their own because they had created this family and this culture of caring so deeply about one another and about their community was this confirmation of what we've been saying in theory this whole time in a way that we weren't even looking for. And so when we're talking about our growth of numbers produced, there's other outputs to this program than just numbers. And another great example of that is our first hire. Her name was Angela Cruz in Palm Beach County. She's a young Hispanic woman, first generation college from Colombia, has worked super hard to get where she is. She came to us and she's like, I want to work for Mi Vecino, but I also really want to run for office. It's my dream to run for office. And Alex and I were like, yes, this is amazing. Of course we want you to run for office. So we had all of that in mind. We were able to offer her a salary position so that once in a while throughout the day, she could go and have a meeting with the firefighters union or a local elected official for an endorsement. And we helped really guide her through. Alex helped put together a field strategy for her campaign. And she won her first election to a local commission. She has now left Mi Vecino and is an elected official. And she won by 32 points. And she won in a district where the person who was running against her was a super right person who employed a lot of the hate tactics that we saw in 2016 and the 2020 elections, with stealing her yard signs, sending death threats, et cetera. And she was able to use this grassroots boots on the ground organizing to stay above the fray and to win. So go ahead, Alex. I think that's it for this slide. We've registered 15,000 voters to date. What's significant about that in a state like Florida is in 2018, our US Senate candidate lost by 10,033 votes. So we have registered the margin of difference of that election. We are on track to register another 20,000 voters by the election voter registration deadline for the midterms. And what that will mean is we'll have registered the margin of difference from the last gubernatorial race in 2018, which was about 30,000 votes.
What I would add here is just that what numbers are not present is that our team speaks to about 1,100 people per day. So we're talking to thousands of people in our community every single week, making a positive impression on people. Even when they don't register with us, we're asking them what issues are important to them. We're again building familiarity, building trust. So when we talk to people, we communicate with people, they know who we are. And we're a trusted partner, and that's incredibly important. And it's really hard to put a number on that.
Yeah, so these are some more of our numbers. We talk to a lot of people every single day. And so something that's important is that and this is another great story, as you can tell, Alex and I love stories, which is the last voter that we registered in 2021, going into the new year, was somebody who had come across our team and was one of these 120,000 conversations 3 different times with 3 different canvassers in Central Florida, before she was finally like, oh my God, I can't get away from you all. Yes, I will register to vote. I know who you are at this point. I've seen you for the past 2 months. I'm registered to vote with us. And so every time that a voter decides not to register with us, is not a lost cause. For a lot of other organizations, it is, because they're on the ground for 60 days and then they're gone. But for us, when we're in the community consistently, that doesn't necessarily mean that that voter is lost to us. It just means that it sometimes takes a little time for people to build trust with giving out their personal information and registering to vote. So there's two different ways that we are working right now to develop and progress Mi Vecino. Number one is, as we mentioned, we've got teams in 5 counties. For those of you who know Florida, we've got 3 in the I-4 corridor in Polk County, Osceola County, and Orange County. Our Palm Beach County is where we have our headquarters, and then we have a team in Miami-Dade County. Those teams are not fully scaled. So the infrastructure is there, the offices is there, the management is all set up, but our structure is set up so that we could add more canvassers, more boots on the ground, and it would not put any stress on those systems. So fully scaling is number one. Number two is there are huge holes being left in the state right now that if filled, we could really help really make a difference for election day. And that's a separate project. So that's Broward County, for example, and some other counties in the I-4 corridor where we could really make a difference. Go ahead, Alex. I think we're just about to get to questions and answers. I think we're pretty much at the end here.
Okay.
But yeah, you all should follow us on social media. We're super cool and we have a TikTok too. So, our team loves making TikToks. So let's stop sharing our screen, Kitty. Is that okay? And then we'll just start taking some questions.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks so much. We have a lot to unpack. There are a lot of questions. The first part that I wanted to talk about is around the changes to voting laws through since the passage of SB 90. There were some questions that came up in the chat. SB 90 was passed in May, I believe. And I know you guys were already engaged in communities and already working on getting people registered to vote. So there's questions about signatures matching and how you're going to be sort of dealing with the election law changes, how you're seeing it play out on the ground, and what your staff is going to do in order to make sure those ballots get counted if you are so focused on vote by mail.
So, those are all really great questions. One of the biggest hurdles is predicting what the election's actually going to look like, because they just passed this law and haven't had an election since, right? So this is going to be the election where we're going to see the big election where we see. But since then, they passed another law that's creating additional restrictions on voting rights, which they already don't know what the outcomes of the first SB 90 is going to be. Now they passed SB 524, which is compounding the issues that we're facing, and it's additionally punishing and complicating the process. So let me give you just an example that I'll pluck out from the mess, the giving tree of voter suppression that is SB 90. If you're in, say, Broward County, where we've had some hotly contested elections and a lot of votes cast, you can ask for a manual review of signatures, vote by mail ballots, to see if they match, and drag out the counting process. Now, why somebody would want to do that, I don't know, but they could. And it's something that has been a concern for municipal elections, because since then we've had some local elections and people are concerned that their opponents are not going to accept the results and will ask for a review of all signatures of all ballots cast. This is a burden on our process. It undermines confidence in our elections, and it's a burden on our supervisor of election offices. When we're on the ground connecting with voters, we have to make sure that we read disclaimers to them that are mandated by SB 90. We face liability if you work in Orange County and we registered you in Osceola because you traveled there for work. That form has to go to the Orange County Supervisor of Elections office, or we could face a fine. And a lot of people commute, and sometimes those forms have to go quite a bit of distance, and they make it additionally complicated when it wasn't previously. So there's a lot of concern around navigating these laws and what the potential impact is going to be on our elections.
I just want to add that both of these laws, 524 and SB 90, neither of them are actually addressing real issues that we have. What they are is a very open and blatant fear tactic to try to help increase or decrease participation from a certain part of the electorate that usually benefits one political party. And so just to give an example of this, we were the only organization on the ground when SB 90 passed, okay? It went into effect immediately. All 67 county SOEs, Supervisor of Elections, were united. There's a lot of red counties in Florida. There's more red counties than blue counties. We're united against SB 90. And we messed up probably the first week of it being passed. And Alex and I read the bill. I called 5 different lawyers to read the bill. And it was very clear that we were going to be fined if we messed up, okay? And we messed up. What was not in the bill is where that money goes if you're fined. They had not thought through which staffer and what department issues that fine. They have not thought through where that fine gets sent back to and what pool in the budget that money goes to. So nothing ever happened to us, okay? That should have been a few $100s that we got a slap on the wrist for, and nothing happened. Now, SB 2524 takes those fines, which were initially capped at $1,000 per year per organization like Mi Vecino, and raises that cap to $50,000. Now they've thought through how those different things happen. Now, here's the trick though, y'all. For an organization like Mi Vecino, if that really happened to us, if we messed up like 200 times and got that $50,000 fine, it would be over enough time and we have enough connections and enough of a coalition that we would be okay. You want to know who's not okay? A small Democratic volunteer organization of probably older people who have been involved in Democratic politics for a really long time, who are going to go spend their Saturday morning registering voters at the local library. They're not going to go do that, right? Because they don't have the capacity to deal with that. And so it's a very open and fear tactic that the Republicans are using. It's rooted in reality, but the actual results are not something that has a large of an impact as I think people think.
That's so disturbing that you could get fined $50,000. That just steam coming out of my hair. Okay. Someone asked a while back, Kira in New York, will you pivot to in-person voting on election day if the vote by mail becomes so entangled in these two new laws, that would get held up and you would have these drawn out elections? Or are you, I know you're really confident in your vote by mail plan just because your data seems, is really good on the return on investment. So can you just speak to us about that a little bit?
I have a couple thoughts around that. So first, vote by mail is a tactic. I think that where some have gone, I worked at the Democratic Party for multiple cycles. I was there, they hung their hat on this single trick. And there's not one thing that's going to win an election here. You have to do many things, and you have to try to do as many of them as well as you can. Vote by mail is about increasing access to voting. It's about giving different opportunities for people to participate. And whatever it is that goes on there, there's a psychological component that is definitely compelling people to get involved. I can't necessarily explain it. We don't have the data, to back it up. But I don't think that should let us, be distracted from the reality that it occurs and that people are behaving this way, and we have the statistics to show. I couldn't tell you how specifically gravity works, but I know if I stepped off my roof, I'd fall to the ground. So I think that just because we don't know why yet, we do know that it's happening, and so we want to act on that. So that's the first part. The second part is that early vote is our friend. And so early vote is still our friend. Election day voting is a little bit stricter, and it's harder for the communities that we work in, because again, the communities that we work in are impacted by the criminal justice system. They're low income communities. People are so concerned with just how they're going to be able to survive right now. How does a mother get apple juice for a baby? How does a working parent put gas in their car to get to their 1 or 2 jobs? What time the polls open or close, or where your precinct is, what the polling location for your precinct is just not top of mind for people. So if you don't get that ballot mailed in, having the option to deliver that ballot and drop it off is always a great one. And also being able to go into an early voting location that any location will be able to take you if it's in your county is another really useful option for our communities and the communities where we work. Election day voting is not as prevalent among our communities, again, because there's more restrictions on access.
Okay, that's really helpful. I think a lot of us just assume that, of course, you can take the day off and go vote. And what we're hearing is that, of course, you can't take the day off and go vote. I mean, it should be a national holiday. It's not, but that's another topic. I'd like to finish our conversation with you guys because we don't have a ton of time to talk about two sort of tracks that are the same but different. The first track is around misinformation and disinformation being focused in Hispanic communities. Obviously, it played out in 2020. Biden is a socialist, all those things. And then also what you guys are hearing on the ground. It was something that we talked about a little bit before the call began, but I think our community would be interested in hearing what we're seeing in the media is not necessarily what you guys are hearing on the ground. So could you talk a little bit about the misinformation that you see impacting the communities that you're working in, and also what those community members really do care about and are focused on, and and concerns that they have for 2022 and beyond. Is that too much, or is that
No,
okay
not
to
at
do
all.
at the same time? Okay.
Not at all.
Do you want to take the issues on the ground, and I'll talk a bit about. We'll both talk about comms.
Yeah. Okay. So I think a lot of what we're seeing about Florida in the headlines is a lot of what DeSantis and the GOP legislature were focused on this last session that just ended on March 11th in Tallahassee. A lot of their priorities were around social issues. Now, when we talk to voters on the ground, they're not worried about those. Out of every 10 voters that we talk to, about one person will mention a social issue. And it's not because that people don't care. It's not because people don't care about equality. It's not because people don't care about abortion. It's because they cannot physically afford to have those be their top voting issues right now. People are getting kicked out of their apartments left and right. We just had an all-staff call yesterday morning, and every single team on the ground is saying that they're talking to voters who are getting less than 15 days notice to move out of their apartment, or their rent goes up $500 a month. And so we've got families that are moving back home with their parents. I talked to my neighbor the other day whose rent is going up $1,000 a month. People cannot afford to live right now. So what people are saying in classrooms in kindergarten, what people are having access to certain healthcare decisions is not top of mind of people. That's number one. Number two is, and I love your name because it's exactly what I'm about to say, is we have to be a Big Tent party. We have to understand that we cannot have stipulations to be a Democrat and to vote Democrat, because when we do, when we say we are this party and you have to believe X, Y, and Z, we lose those voters. We can't afford to lose those voters. We have to understand that we have to be a party where there are going to be Democratic voters who are pro-life, who are anti-abortion in any form or any fact, right? And that's hard to grapple with for some of us, but we have to get there. We have to understand that we have Democrats that go to church. We have to understand that there are deeply religious Democrats. And as soon as we buy into that culture war and start pushing back and we make that our entire platform, we lose working class everyday people. Now, I'm not saying that there's not a certain demographics, especially suburban white women, college educated women, where those issues are important. But I am saying that if we make that a certain thing that you have to adhere to in our party, on our platform, we will not win. We have to be a Big Tent. So that's what we're hearing from people on the ground. I think it's pretty united across the country right now, but it's really magnified, especially in Florida right now around the housing crisis.
I think on the, thank you for that, Devin. That's a lot of that. I mean, that is just spot on. That's what people are concerned about. And it's really hard to be concerned about those other issues when you and your children are about to become homeless. And that's just the facts. What doesn't pop up as much is that, with the increased cost of things, again, we work in the poorest communities. We work in the communities where nobody wants to go work. When we start to see these price increases that affect the pocketbook of working class people, a lot of these people are already on social assistance, and when the price of goods goes up, the assistance available does not go up, and so young ladies can't afford hygiene products anymore because the costs have gone up, and they're having to make tough decisions between food, survival, these social issues are just not on the forefront for people right now in the communities where we're working. But they want to hear solutions. They don't want to see Republicans creating, fictitious manufactured fights. They don't want to see Democrats fighting amongst themselves. They want to see and hear how these problems can be solved, and they want answers. They want help. So what we do is we try to provide that in any way that we can by being a bridge, being a partner that helps them to navigate, to find resources, and to sustain themselves. We know that the Democrats, particularly the Democratic Party, struggles with messaging. We've been there, we've seen it. A lot of it comes down to diversity. A lot of it comes down to just not doing a great job historically from previous cycles. But an additional very basic concept that people need to understand is that no matter how good your message is, you could find the right sequence of words to string together to persuade a person. If they don't like you, they're not going to want to hear your message, right? They're not going to listen to you, no matter how great your message is. If they're too busy worried about surviving, they're not listening to your message. You need to deliver the message they want to hear. And the message they want to hear is, how the hell do I get through this? Mm-hmm. Where are the answers here? And that's what people in the communities where we're working, they want to hear. And this is why the Latino vote is a swing vote. This is why that if Val Demings wanted to win this constituency, she could. But she needs to come down to the I-4 corridor. She needs to talk to people. She needs to have solutions. And she needs to base her campaign in the solutions. And if she doesn't, then what happens is Marco Rubio, who has like a 90% name ID in the community, will go there in that space that she's not filling, and he'll offer those things in turn. And then they'll go vote for him. And it's really that simple.
Yeah, I think the other thing too that's important here is what Alex is saying is your message and your messenger have to match. That's number one. And number two is Mi Vecino is becoming a leader in the community. And that takes time. It takes time to shift people's minds. It takes time to make a well-informed argument that isn't just words. It's not just a message. It's backed up by action. And that's where the trust comes in. And that's where the shift in a community mindset comes in. And so we've seen states like Wisconsin do what they've done. We've seen what Stacey Abrams and her community partners did in Georgia. It works. It takes time. When Obama won here in 2008, his organization, his organizers were on the ground for 2 years before Election Day. And so there is hope here, right? And so whether or not we win at the top of the ticket, whether or not Val Demings takes an L on November 8th, we're going to be on the ground on November 9th, right? Because regardless of what happens, if we show up and we fight for people, and we just the action of showing up and not just saying, hey, you matter to us, we're actually there to show that in action, it's going to pay off. People want to feel like they are worth fighting for. And that's what that action shows. And so I do want to end on a little bit of a hopeful note that the people that we're hiring, we've got Sebastian, who's a Marine. He just got back from Afghanistan. We hired him 2 weeks later. We promoted him from a canvasser to a field organizer because he was doing such a great job. He's creating content on social media. He's talking to people in person, specifically young Hispanic men, about why there's a place in this party for them. Because when he came to us, he was a Republican. And he very slowly, through learning about our political system and about these issues, became and re-registered as a Democrat. And so employing young people, employing the type of people who you're trying to persuade is the biggest way that we can help move these people over time.
I would just add to that, Devin, that it's because we don't try to tell our staff what they should think or how they should vote. We just live our ideals and we mean it. And so we want people to know they're valued because they are valued. They're valued by us. They matter to us, which is why we're doing this work. That's why I'm not still at the Democratic Party. That's why Devin's not raising millions of dollars for some federal campaign. This work matters. These communities matter. These people matter, and we hope that that you believe in the work as much as we do.
Thank you so much, Devon and Alex. And I want to, I just appreciate your time and your effort and your talent. We are truly grateful that you're doing the work that you're doing. And I hope everyone on this call, if you are having a dark day or a dark month or a dark week, that spending some time with Alex and Devon has given you some light in your life. I really hope that you'll go to their website and check it out and think about supporting them because their work is really crucial. I'd love to clone you guys and send you all around the United States. That'd be perfect. I want to turn the call over to our friend Karen Mara. She's going to talk about our first letter writing initiative of the 2022 midterms, which is going to be focused on Florida, of course, and we're going to be working with Vote Forward again. So again, thank you, Alex and Devon. We really appreciate it. And Karen, take it away.
Thanks, Kitty. And big thanks to Alex and Devon. I am so impressed. You are the kind of grassroots movement that we have used to inspire our work over the last year and a half and how meaningful it is. And anyway, I'm a big fan. This is fantastic. I hope we can continue to support your good work and that you can inspire us. So thank you. So Big Tent, we have written many, many letters. We use this organization, Vote Forward, as many of you know, and we have generated thousands of letters that have gone out to voters and helped to inspire them to register and to vote. And we're going to start that effort again. So 2 weeks from today, on the 19th, our group is going to gather and we're going to do a letter writing meeting, and it'll be a moderated discussion. We're going to talk about politics. We're going to talk about what we're doing, what we care about. We're going to talk about Mi Vecino again, and we'll say how, we'll think about all these good things as we write our letters. And we have 500 letters ready to give out to you to send to Florida registered voters. So if anybody wants to get started and start the process, you can send a note to Vanessa, who is our moderator here. And Vanessa has these. You can, it's info@BigTentUSA.org, or, go to our website, go to Vanessa, figure out how to get these batches of, usually batches of 20, ask for 20, ask for 40. And if not, just come to our meeting in 2 weeks and we're going to get together and we're going to write and we're going to talk to each other and we're going to support each other and talk about what we're thinking about and caring about. And this month, it's all about Florida. We're hoping that in future months, we're going to have more speakers and focus on other states. So in the future, we may do Michigan or we may do Arizona, and we're going to have someone speaking to us about what's happening in those states. And then we're going to continue with the letter writing campaigns in those states, or any state that you feel attached to that is meaningful. Vote Forward has lots of letters available. So anyway, I'm so glad, and I hope you'll all join us in 2 weeks, and we will be together again and we will write Vote Forward letters. Get in touch with Big Tent. And again, thank you for being here today. I'm going to close out the meeting and say what a pleasure it's been. It's really an honor to hear Alex and Devon. Very grateful. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.